Welcome to Forest North, a podcast from the Superior National Forest. I'm your host, Brett Ross. Join me as we hear from some folks who live, work, and recreate on our national forest lands here in northeastern Minnesota. This episode, we'll hear from Maggie Whiting, Visitor Services Information Assistant with the Cowishiwi Ranger District in Ely. Maggie gives a complete run-through on Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness trip planning and how to get your permit when they go live on Wednesday, January 31st. Steve Robertson returns. We talk about some effects of the lack of early season snow, some ways to enjoy the winter conditions now that they're here, and what some of the winged creatures are up to here in January in the North Woods. Forest North is created by the Ely Tourism Bureau in partnership with the USDA Forest Service Superior National Forest. Find out more about the Superior National Forest at fs.usda.gov/superior. Be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening through, and email your questions or comments to tourism@ely.org. I'm Brett Ross. Welcome to Forest North. Maggie Whiting is the Visitor Services Information Assistant with the Cowishiwi Ranger District on the Superior National Forest. Hello, Maggie.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you for being here.
It's exciting to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. We are in our second episode of Forest North, and I'm so glad to have you here. Before we jump into the real meat of our conversation, if you wouldn't mind giving people a little bit of a background about yourself.
Certainly. Well, I come to the Forest Service in 2006. My dad was stationed at the Isabella Ranger Station for over 30 years, and so I grew up with the Forest Service and in the Boundary Waters all my life, just loving every minute of it, my own personal Disney World, I suppose. And, of course, I love doing what I do and helping people to enjoy the Boundary Waters and the wilderness area and the Superior National Forest. I'm just really loving every moment of it.
Well, that's fantastic. It sounds like you are in the perfect job.
It is the perfect job.
That's
I
really
meet
great.
so many people and learn so many things, and I just help everyone that I can to learn about the Boundary Waters and the forest and how they can be a better steward.
And so that is sort of the crux of your job as a Visitor Services Information Assistant, is basically acquainting people with what happens in the Superior National Forest.
Yes, it is. We talk about the Boundary Waters, we talk about the forest, we talk about camping, we talk about hiking. There's so many questions and so many answers that have to go out to make their visit comfortable and so that they know the rules and they know what to do. It's not like any other place that you go in the world.
Right.
There's many things that people just don't know, and it's wonderful to share with them. I love every moment of it.
Excellent. So if someone is just stumbling onto this podcast and they're not familiar with the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, could you give a little bit of insight as to what is the Boundary Waters?
Well, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is set apart. And to go into the Boundary Waters Wilderness, you need a permit. And so doing that is sometimes a big adventure for people and so unknown. And there's many ways to learn about it. So you can go to recreation.gov, and there's a start point where you can go in and just as soon as you put in Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, it's going to bring you to the permit section. Mm-hmm. And there's a section there that says, walk me through.
Okay.
You can actually go through that step by step, and it will ask you, do you want to motor? Do you want to hike? Do you want to paddle? So each thing that you want to do, it's going to ask you step by step. If you don't want to go to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness section, or you don't feel comfortable going to recreation.gov and asking those questions, you can call us at the ranger station or any station that's close to your entry point. You can also call recreation.gov at 1-877-444-6777. And we will walk you through the process.
So people can call and talk to an actual human being.
Yes, I get that a lot, where people say, "Are you real?" You are real. Yes,
Right.
we will. I just finished today 20 minutes with a person who had never gotten a permit before, didn't know how, and I walked them through the process.
And so there are different types of permits. You mentioned there's motor permits, there's canoeing permits, there's just hiking permits. Talk about what sets the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness apart from the rest of the Superior National Forest land and just the rest of public land in the United States in general.
Well, in the forest, the rules and regulations are not as concise as they are with the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. We have a trip planning guide on our website and on recreation.gov. We also have a what to know before you go. And these compile all the rules and regulations that you must comply with to be able to go out into the Boundary Waters. It also helps you to have a better trip. So knowing those rules and regulations before you even decide, do you really want to go into the wilderness? There's many rules and regulations, and you have to be comfortable with them. So once you decide that, then you can go through the process of going into recreation.gov and getting a permit. So it's the rules and regulations for the Boundary Waters that sets it apart.
And so, for example, obviously the fact that you need a permit puts a limit on the number of people that can actually travel into the Boundary Waters.
Yes.
Or go in through a particular entry point.
Exactly.
On any given day.
Exactly. There's quotas set for each entry point, and those are the ones like where we are going to go live soon on January 31st at 9 a.m. Central Time. So before you decide what you're going to do and you want to go to the Boundary Waters, you have to make sure that you have all the rules and regulations in your mind and know what you have to do, what you can't do, and decide, do you really honestly want to go into the wilderness, or do you want to just explore in the forest? We have 254 backcountry sites that you can go to without a permit, without a reservation. There's campgrounds also, so there's a lot of options. And the wilderness sets it apart. And there's a quota system, and you do have to reserve a permit for that.
So as far as the more restrictive regulations in the wilderness, can you give sort of an overview of what are some of those restrictions that set the wilderness apart from the rest of the Superior National Forest?
Okay, to go in, you cannot bring any cans or bottles, anything into the Boundary Waters. Everything has to be in returnable plastic containers.
Okay.
So there's those things. You can... as you go out into the Boundary Waters, there's no reservable campsites. So you have to plan ahead and know how you can paddle. So once you go out, you go until you find a site that is open. Mm-hmm. So there's no reservable. You can only bring in a permit for watercraft. Mm-hmm. There can only be 9 people for watercraft. You must have a fire in the campfire grate itself. Mm-hmm. That fire must be out, cold to the touch before you go to sleep, go fishing. The only thing you can burn in that fire is wood, and the wood that is dead and down. Mm-hmm. You can't cut down anything, chop down anything, take the birch bark off the trees. There's specific rules set for that. You don't bathe in the water. There's no soap allowed, not grandma's soap, soap you make, soap that's camp soap, no soap in the water at all. Why? Of course, because you're going to drink out of that water.
Right.
So there are a whole sets of rules, and those are all listed in the trip planning guide and what to know before you go, and on our website, or you can call us at the Forest Service, any one of the district office, and we can rattle those rules off to you. Those rules are also listed on your permit on the back, and you sign off to know that those rules you have read and you understand. There's also a 3-part video that you're going to watch. You're going to get the first 2 parts when your permit is already reserved. And then when you come to pick up your permit, whether you're going to pick it up from a cooperator or from the Forest Service, you're going to watch that 3rd video, and then we're going to go through the rules and regs with you once more time, or just ask if you have any questions.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about a cooperator, those are outfitters?
Those are outfitters that issue our permits, and they are all listed on the back of the trip planning guide. And also, they're listed when you go in to reserve your permit. Mm-hmm. And you're going to want to pick one of those outfitters that is closest to your entry point as possible.
So the specific regulations about the wilderness make it so that it's not something to take lightly when you're going on a trip into the Boundary Waters. You really have to do a lot of planning. You have to really be prepared. You have to be very aware of what you bring into the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness with you.
You definitely do, because everything that you pack in, you need to pack out.
Right.
So another one of the rules is, your food, you're going to cook your food, and if you drop your macaroni on the ground and it's full of dirt, what are you going to do with it? Right. You cannot put it in the latrine. You cannot throw it in the lake. You cannot bury it on the land. You're going to have to take that and put it in a plastic bag, zip it up, and you're going to bring it back. So there's a lot to think about what you're going to do. Also, how are you going to keep your food safe? Mm-hmm. Are you going to hang your food? Are you going to put it in a bear barrel? What are you going to do? There's certain things that we suggest and we help you go through depending on where you're going to go and what you're going to do and how long you're going to be out. So those are all things to consider.
Yeah, you really can't underestimate how important meal planning is for those trips. First of all, making sure that you have enough food to eat while you're out there, but also what you're going to do with that food when you're in your campsite to keep it away from bears. And as you mentioned, if you drop some food on the ground, you don't want to leave it there. You don't want to put food in your campfire. You definitely don't want to have it in your tent with you, because it's just going to attract bears. And what we see in a lot of areas where people do that, where people leave food and things behind in campsites, it habituates the bears, and the bears will keep coming back to those campsites.
Yeah, the bears are interested in food, right, and they can smell food a mile away.
Literally.
So literally a mile away. And food is kind of a misnomer, because chapstick, toothpaste, gum,
right,
sunflower seeds, bears' one of favorite foods, grapes, candies, any of those things. So what snacks are you going to bring in the tent? None. Nothing. Not chapstick, not anything. Everything is going to be put away before you go to sleep at night. Those are all things that people don't think about, because why would you? You don't have to unless you're out in the wilderness in that situation. It's extremely important.
Sure. And so a big advantage of having the permit system and having all the resources around that permit system can help ensure that people have all the pertinent information before they start to plan a trip, before they actually head into the wilderness.
Exactly. And you have to decide, you should have at least 3 choices of where you want to go. You may not get your first choice. You should have at least 3 of those. And so before you even decide, you have to look, where do you think you want to go? Pick 3 or 4 different places. so that you're not disappointed. And if you don't get them, if you don't get any of them, we can work with you and help you pick another choice or have you go in on another entry point to get you to the same place. You don't always have to go from your favorite entry point. You can always go from another entry point and work your way towards your favorite point. So there's a lot that helps when you call your district office that's closest, and we can help you with that.
And it's, of course, important to mention that it's not just a free-for-all as far as camping goes. You can't just go to a place where this looks like a nice flat spot to pitch a tent. You have to be in a designated campsite with a latrine, with a fire grate.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And on the maps, you will see little red dots. Those little red dots are going to tell you that, yes, that is where you can camp. You can't camp in another spot in the Boundary Waters except that has fire grate and a latrine.
And don't take for granted that because, one lake's paddle from your entry point, there's a campsite, and that's the campsite that you want to get. There's a good chance that someone's already going to be at that campsite. So you have to know where the other campsites are, and you have to be willing to keep paddling and find that next campsite.
First come, first serve.
Right.
That's true. And you want to start earlier in the day, as early as you can. Leaving at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon can be sad.
Right.
You have to paddle a lot further than you would think you would. It's getting dusk. The whole process of that is planning ahead and preparing so that your trip is successful and you are happy and you do want to do that again.
And setting up camp at a site you've never been to before in the woods in the dark, it's not a lot of fun.
It is not fun at all. No, it is not. And it could rain, or it could be windy, or so many things. So we do suggest that you start as early as you possibly can.
And so you bring up some other points too. Weather. Things like wind can really alter your plans. If you are planning on having a day's worth of travel to get to your destination or to get back out through an entry point, wind can really disrupt that. So being prepared for those eventualities of not being able to be on the water when the wind is really high.
It is true, because your permit is for that day. You must go in that day. So you want to prepare and you want to watch the weather and you want to know what's going, because you have to go. It's like a plane, a train, a bus, or you're going to go that day. That is the day you can go. If you don't go that day, then your permit is not valid. You would have to get another permit to go the next day. So it's not something that you can put off. And so planning ahead and preparing, again, is just one of the most things that you can do to make your trip successful.
Yeah, and as with any wilderness adventure, the best way to ensure a fun trip and a successful trip is to plan properly.
Plan ahead and prepare.
Yep.
And we tell people, I think it's just really important to do, once you've decided and you've picked one and you're going to go and you're going to get your permit, we see people that have not picked an alternate when they're going to make their permit. It's imperative that you can pick up to 3 alternates that can pick up your permit.
Okay.
If you can't go, if your tires get flat, if you have car trouble, many different things, so that you can still go then if there's another person that's able to pick up your permit.
So if you don't have someone else in your group that's named as an alternate, if you're not there yourself to actually pick it up, nobody goes.
Nobody goes. No. And it's very important, because things do happen. Life gets in the way, and those things happen. So having someone else to be able to pick it up, and then that person finally gets there, it's fine. They've gone through the rules and regs. They've listened to all the things that have come up. If there's weather that's coming up, we're going to tell them. If there's fire danger, we're going to tell them. If there's bear issues around where they're going, we're going to tell them. And the person that didn't make it, those people that were there and listened to the rules and regulations are signing the permit because they were an alternate, and they can give those rules and regulations and get that person caught up. And the trip is successful and they get to go. If that doesn't happen, you don't get to go.
Right. Right. And also, with so much technology, with technology being so ubiquitous in our lives now, it's easy to take for granted that you can pull out your phone and look at Google Maps and say, this is where I am. I know where I am right now. In the wilderness, that's not always the case. In fact, it's rarely the case with a lot of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness that you would even have cell coverage.
Yeah. Cell coverage is dubious at most.
Yeah.
You need a map and a compass.
Mm-hmm.
You do.
And to know how to use them properly.
And know how to use it. I've been in the wilderness all my life. I've been on almost every lake in the Boundary Waters. And you can get turned around with wind, with rain, with sleet. You never know what it's going to do. You must have a map and a compass and know how to use it. It's imperative.
Yeah, my first solo trip into the Boundary Waters, I had all of those things. I had wind, I had rain, I had a map that I thought I knew. That I was reading it correctly, and I thought I knew where the portage was, and I paddled right on past the portage, and I kept looking for the portage, and I couldn't find it, and then the wind picked up, and a storm rolled in, and luckily I was able to find a campsite where I was able to just pull in there, pull my canoe out of the water, and sit under my tarp for an hour and a half until the rain cleared up. And I just remember thinking, boy, I really screwed up, but also, I had studied the rules and regulations. I had prepared as best as I could. I had the right gear, and I knew to get off of the water when there was weather coming through. And then after the storm cleared, I had plenty of time to look over my map and go, okay, I see likely where I passed by the portage. The storm cleared and the water was like glass. The sun came out and it was gorgeous. I paddled back to the portage and the rest of my trip was fantastic. And an important thing to remember, I think, in a situation like that is don't panic. And I think the best way to not panic when you are in a situation like that is to be prepared, to know that you have the right gear, to know all of your contingencies for weather and possibly being lost or getting turned around. Again, just proper planning can make all the difference in the world. It's
so important. And you have to know where you are in the world and be able to set yourself where you are so you know where you're going. And yes, we tell people, it might be 80 when they go out, but you have to prepare for the weather. It can get colder. It can rain. The bugs can be a definite issue. You know that. Bring a head net, bring bug spray, bring a first aid kit. Make sure you're prepared for everything because there's no local store. There's no little place that you're going to go to pick something up that you forgot. And so there's a checklist on our trip planning guide. It tells you what to bring. It tells you what is important. And they all are important because you never know what's going to happen. You just don't know. So being prepared for every possible scenario makes your trip a whole lot easier. And it's probably the most important point is to be prepared for everything so that you're loving your trip and wanting to come back.
Right. And so one of the big designations about the wilderness area is the restriction on motors. And of course, people associate motors with, your 50-horse Johnson on the back of your boat or whatever it is. But I think there's a lot of things that people don't realize are considered mechanical, like a sail on your boat. Or this time of year when the lakes are frozen, I have a fat tire bike. Mm-hmm. You can't ride a fat tire bike in the Boundary Waters.
No. And there's certain kayaks that have paddles on them and rudders, and you can't use those also. Again, get the trip planning guide. Make sure you look at that. And if you have any question about what you're going to bring, again, you can call any one of the district offices. And I also have the permit manager, and this person is in the Duluth supervisor's office, and I'm going to give you her number. She will go through every possible scenario with you. If you decide you want to bring, can I bring my battery-operated toothbrush?
Right.
And you're just wondering if maybe that's true, you can call us at the ranger station also, but you can call the permit manager, and you might want to write this down. It's 218-626-4314. So any one of those questions, and we get all kinds of them. It's good to ask before you bring. People ask us all the time when they come in if they can bring this or that, or is it okay if they bring a foil wrapper of tuna other than a can? If there's a can of tuna, no, you cannot. Can you bring the tuna in the foil wrapper? Yes, you can, but that foil wrapper must be brought back.
Right.
So it's nuances as little as that. And our wilderness rangers, who do an amazing job, are going to be out there helping you. And so they're going to remind you if they stop and they see that, or you're trying to burn that piece of foil or whatever. You can't. In the state of Minnesota, you can't burn rubbish. So anything in that fire grate that's like that is a no-no. But they're going to remind you about that and help you remember, because people forget. It's just different out there. And so those are all things to remember. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah. And so just one other point that I wanted to bring up. I know I'm a photographer myself. People love to photograph in the Boundary Waters. There's some beautiful opportunities for landscape photos, for wildlife photos. I was watching a video just a couple of weeks ago of some folks that had been out on a winter camping trip, and some of the footage that they had looked distinctly like it was filmed from a drone. And there's pretty specific rules about drones.
Very specific. So you cannot have drones in the Boundary Waters. And if you are doing a commercial filming, you have to get a permit for that. And again, you can call your local district office, and we're going to help you with that. That person will go through that with you and perhaps make that happen. But there's rules and regulations for that also. So there are special use permits that you can do that with. But generally, can you take pictures of birds and the kids at the fire and fishing? Yes, of course you can.
Right.
But anything that's commercial out there would need a special use permit. And our special use specialists can definitely help you with that.
Excellent. So many great resources. And so the big day is coming up soon. It's January 31st. That's when the permits go live at recreation.gov. What all does that entail?
Do you know, the first thing that you need to do is to make sure that on recreation.gov, you've made yourself a profile.
Okay.
Make sure that's all set.
And you could do that right now.
You can do that right now. You can do that anytime. Make sure your name, your full address, your phone number, your email, or if you have an old account and you've changed your email or you've changed your phone or you've changed your address, call them at 1-877-444-6777 and get that profile right. Your credit card information, just like any place else that you would order something, make sure you've got that correct. That's extremely important in recreation.gov.
And make sure that's done before 9 a.m. on
Way
January
before 9 a.m. And so get into recreation.gov that morning. Make sure that at 9 a.m. you've refreshed your page, and then go in and you can explore available permits. And another thing that you must do is you must use Chrome.
Oh, okay. Google Chrome for your browser.
Use Google Chrome. Anything else will let you get to the end, and then it won't work.
Oh, that's got to be frustrating.
It's frustrating. And some people, you will see on recreation.gov, there is an app.
Okay.
And you can put the app on your phone, but do not use that app for Boundary Waters permits.
Okay.
It does not work for permits. You can use it for campgrounds, but don't use that app.
Right. And so come 9 o'clock on January 31st, like you mentioned, it's a first come, first serve basis. So anyone that's looking at permits for the Boundary Waters for the upcoming season is going to be on the site.
There are a lot of people that are on there right away. And again, make sure you've got everything set for your profile. Make sure you've got your choices, 3 or 4 choices that you want to go. So if you don't get your first choice, you get your second or third choice. Make sure that that's all set. Go in and do what you can as best you can. If you don't get what you want, again, life gets in the way. And after the first week or so, you can go back in, and what you have seen at 10 o'clock on the 31st or 11 is going to be different because people are going to put things back in. They picked the wrong one. They've picked 2 of the same. And if you have 2 or 3 of the same on the same day with the same leader, we're going to take 2 of those away. So you can't overlap permits like that. So, and that happens because you're excited and you may do that. You may have more than one on the same day with the same leader. You can't do that. So coming back and checking recreation.gov to see what has changed since the very beginning and your favorite entry point is gone. You can also call us and we can help you with that and go through it and look for you. And we can also suggest that you might want to take another entry point and again, come through the back way to the point that you wanted to go to begin with. And if there's no place that you've picked and you can't get any of them, we'll help you find a place. It might not be in the Boundary Waters or it might be a completely different place in the Boundary Waters, but we'll work with you and make your trip just as successful.
Yeah. And so when you mentioned that it may not be in the Boundary Waters, considering that we have close to 4 million acres of forest on the Superior National Forest, you're not specifically limited to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. There are a number of, as you mentioned, backcountry sites, campgrounds. There are a lot of opportunities for recreation outside of the Boundary Waters, but still on the National Forest and still very much the same terrain, the same landscapes, equally good fishing, wildlife viewing, all of those things. There, if you don't get your top choices on go live day, that doesn't mean that you can't be in the forest.
The choices are enormous. And if you were blindfolded and brought to some of these other places, you would think you were in the Boundary Waters. You wouldn't know. There is really no way to tell sometimes. So we've had a lot of success with helping people find other places. And they come back and go and want to explore a little more. I mean, going to the same place is wonderful, and some people have where they've gone to the same spot for the last 30 years. And perhaps they didn't get this last year, and they couldn't go there. And we found other places, given them a chance. They went, they loved it. It was perfect. Give yourself some slack. Pick some other places and see what's out there. It's all wonderful. It's like a box of chocolates. They're all good.
Right. So important things to keep in mind. Once again, just be prepared. Make sure that your rec.gov profile is all up to date. Make sure all of your information is accurate and correct before the permits go live. Have alternate choices for entry points. Exactly. Have your alternates for picking up the permit. Know who's going to go with you. Just really be prepared, and then don't lose heart if you don't get your choices on that day. Be willing to check back later on, or be willing to explore some areas you haven't explored before.
Exactly. And we will help you. Any one of the district offices, they all have wonderful people that are there. That's our job, is to help you. If you don't get what you want, we will help you find something else.
And that's fantastic. We've all had experiences on the internet where the browser isn't working or the the Wi-Fi's down. You feel like there's always something. Technology can be great, but it can also be incredibly frustrating. So if all else fails, pick up the phone, call 877-444-6777, talk to an actual person that would be more than happy to help you out. You may even get to talk to Maggie.
Right, exactly. The district office closest to your entry point, we can help you. Recreation.gov, they can help you. Our permit manager that I gave that number before, 218-626-4314, she can help you. So you can call any one of the district offices or the supervisor's office in Duluth, and all those numbers are listed on our website. Call us. We'll help. We'll do the best we can because our job is to get you out into the woods, into the wilderness, into the forest, and just enjoy the outdoors. That's our goal.
Outstanding. Well, a lot of people are thinking about summertime, thinking about their trip into the Boundary Waters. Some, their 30th year going into the Boundary Waters. Others, their very first. So hopefully this overview, we've shared a lot of information over the last half an hour, and hopefully this can help people be better prepared for getting their permits and making that trip into the Boundary Waters.
We're all waiting for those calls. And if you have any questions, anytime, up to go live and during go live, call the district offices, call recreation.gov. Let us help you. It's what we're there for.
Wonderful. Maggie Whiting, Visitor Services Information Assistant with the Cowish Ranger District on the Superior National Forest. Thank you so much for joining us on Forest North.
It was wonderful, and I just hope everyone is excited for the season as I am, and I'm just looking forward to many new faces coming into the Cowish Ranger Station and giving us a call, and we're just excited for the new season.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for all you do. Welcome back to Forest North. I'm your host, Brett Ross, and I'm joined once again here on episode 2 by Steve Robertson, Interpretation and Education Specialist with the Superior National Forest. Welcome back, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
We had a really entertaining segment in the last episode talking about hibernation, some of the behaviors of animals in the winter time, particularly frogsicles and that hidden life of turtles in the winter time.
Yes, the secret life of turtles.
Right. It's
soon to be a major motion picture.
It could be. It's certainly fascinating. So I know this winter we've had very much a relative lack of snow so far, and I've just been appreciating the fact that we have snow on the ground. I've spent a lot of time just over the last 4 or 5 days on the Superior National Forest, both here in the Ely area and near the North Shore of Lake Superior. And my favorite thing about wintertime is how the snow tells a story of the critters in the woods. And I love seeing the tracks in the snow and trying to figure out what it was and what it was doing and if it's being chased or chasing something else.
Oh, well, that's definitely one of the best things about winter as far as I'm concerned. We do cross-country skiing. My wife and I go out fairly often during the winter. We were out a few times over the last couple of days, too, to take advantage of the snow. And honestly, I mean, skiing is fun, but I really like stopping and looking at tracks.
Yeah.
There's so much more going on out there that you just don't see during the summer.
Right.
I mean, if you're walking your dog along, your dog knows it's there because they smell.
Yep.
And it's always interesting the winter that, I'll walk the dog and I can actually see what he's smelling. It's like, oh, he is smelling those tracks there that I couldn't see in the summer. But in the winter, you see snowshoe hare tracks, you see pine marten tracks, you can see how they interact with each other. And yeah, it's a real story, and it's all spread out for people to look at in the snow.
So one live action scene that played out in front of me by the North Shore, I was skiing through untracked country on a ski trail, but it was untracked, and so 6 to 8 inches of snow, so it was a bit of a slog. And then on a ridge, sort of the highest point of the trail that I was on, the wind off the lake was coming perpendicular across the trail, and so it was creating these drifts that the best way I can describe is they look like speed bumps.
Sure.
And so these very smooth, rounded, couple foot high snowdrifts that went the full width of the trail. And as I was noticing, the smoothness of these speed bumps, I had just noticed a little ripple in the snow. And as soon as I noticed it, a ruffed grouse just exploded out from under the snow. And I didn't realize that they'll actually bury themselves completely in the snow.
Yeah, they do. That's one of the ways that they survive cold weather. They will dive into the snow in a loose snowdrift and bury themselves underneath there and stay warm during the night. One of the troubles they have occasionally, not with this past snow, but if you end up then with an ice glaze over the top of the snow, they can actually get trapped under there and die.
Oh, man.
That they can't get out again. But under ordinary circumstances, they obviously get out just fine, and it's a good place to hide as well as to stay warm.
I was really impressed, and it just about gave me a heart attack, but it was such a cool thing to see. And they seem like such a fragile little chicken-like critter, and so to see them surviving at 15 below with the wind chill, I love the ingenuity of it.
Yeah, you'd think their feet get cold, but all birds have a countercurrent in their bloodstream so that the blood going down to the feet runs alongside the blood coming back up from the feet, so it cools down the blood before it goes down into their feet, and then it warms the blood back up before it comes into the body again. So they run with their feet at a much lower temperature than their body.
Okay.
Which, when you look at them, they don't have a lot of feathers and stuff on their feet as a general rule, so they're really prone to frostbite. But by doing that, they can maintain their body temperature better, and they don't lose all their heat through their feet.
It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Talking about birds, this past December, I was noticing a lot more hawks than I typically see in December. I don't recall ever really seeing hawks this far north in December, and I believe it was a rough-legged hawk.
Yep.
That I saw a few different ones of them. So that, as I understand it, is primarily related to our lack of snow cover and the milder temperatures.
Yeah, and I would have guessed rough-legged hawk if you hadn't said so. Rough-leggeds are a northern species. They're rough-legged because they, in fact, do have feathers going all the way down under their feet to keep themselves warm.
Right.
But they normally go farther south than this during the winter. I remember when we were living down in Wisconsin that you could see a rough-legged on almost every farmer's field. There'd be a tree in the middle of the field and there'd be a hawk on it.
Yeah.
So they go a little bit farther south than here, generally speaking. And what they're really driven by is a lack of food. Mm-hmm. The food is still up here. They're going to be eating small mammals, mice and voles and what have you. But the food normally is hidden underneath 4 feet of snow, and a hawk just has no way to find those critters down underneath the snow.
Right.
So without snow, they can still see the critters running around. In fact, there's not any brush on the ground. There isn't anything growing down there, so it's really easy for them to see stuff. So as far as the roughlegs were concerned, it was a really good winter for them. They didn't have to fly far south. They had abundant food. They're doing good. Small mammals, not so great for them. A little bit harder for them to get along. And then normally the bird of prey that you do see up here in the winter are owls. Mm-hmm. And owls can manage because they're not using their vision to find their food as much as they're using their hearing.
Right.
So they can still hear the small mammals underneath the snow, and they can find things by hearing them, and they don't care if the snow is there or not. So they're able to stay here throughout the winter and still be able to find a meal under the snow.
Is that true of all the species of owls that we have in the region, as far as you know?
As far as I know, I think that's pretty true. If you look at an owl's face, their really distinctive feature is that big facial disc, they call it, that's the big circles around their eyes.
Yep.
If you plucked an owl and you plucked all of its really loose, soft feathers out, you'd find out that those are two parabolic earphones, basically, or microphones. That they're two dishes that are faced forwards that are connected to the ear on one side and pointed forwards on the other side. So they have ears as big as their head, basically.
Wow.
They're also kind of odd that their wiring is different from most animals. The way our ears connect to our brain, it goes along the scale, basically, just like a piano. Our eyes map out things in 3 dimensions on our brain. With an owl, their ears map out things in 3 dimensions on their brain. So they're literally seeing locations in a sense. The same way you visualize things with your eyes, they're able to see where things are with their ears. If that makes sense. Yeah, it really is. Would be a totally different way of perceiving the world if you could see it like an owl hears it.
Going back to the point about the snow telling the story of what's going on in the woods, every once in a while in the wintertime, you'll see signs of basically feather marks in the snow where it sure looks like an owl had come down and snatched something right up out of the snow.
Yep, and that's exactly what they're doing. If you see slow motion photography or a still picture of an owl when it goes down into the snow, they are able to stretch their legs out way farther than you think they can. Their body is an awful lot of feathers and not a lot of body in there. So they have their talons and their feet stretched out in front of them, their wings kind of held up behind their back, and then they just go down with their feet and nail stuff, sometimes a foot or so below the snow line.
Wow. So will they actually get a good portion of their body into the snow then to do that, or is it mostly legs?
Mostly legs and lower portion of the body, but a lot of it's leg. Once in a while, you'll see a picture that's of what an owl's skeleton looks like. And if you look at it, they've got a lot more leg than it looks like when you just see an owl sitting there. Wow.
Yeah, and they look a lot bigger than they are. I had an incident years ago with our local radio station here in town. It was I believe it was a short-eared owl that likely hit one of the guy wires on the tower. And so it was on the ground, obviously couldn't fly. So I called up the vet clinic, who then called up the raptor center. And there was a whole process of trying to rescue this bird. And so they said, if you can, put some gloves on, pick it up, put it in a box. So I was a little nervous at first because they're kind of intimidating, even though it was a very small little owl, they're kind of intimidating. But then picking it up, it was almost like a balloon with feathers. There's virtually nothing to it. I was just amazed at how little weight there was to the body of these owls.
Yep. And of course, that's another way that they are able to be up here in the winter is they've got great insulation because they do have all of those feathers. And obviously we steal that idea in our down coats and down sleeping bags and such. But feathers are great insulation, and a big fluffy owl does really well up here in the winter.
For sure. Well, and that's one of the things that you learn spending time in the woods in the winter time here is just that. If you're going to be out and you want to enjoy it, you've got to have the right gear on. You've got to be wearing the right layers. It's so worth it to have the right gear to be able to be out in the cold temperatures like we've had, especially the last few days here, kind of the coldest days of the winter so far. Learning those lessons from these animals that adapt to living in these cold conditions can really help us to be out and really make the most of wintertime.
Oh, for sure. And it really pays to have good clothes on and then suit your clothing to whatever you're doing. If you're out there recreating and you're skiing and stuff, it's 10 degrees out. I am not wearing all that much as far as coats are concerned because you end up just sweating like crazy if you do. On the other hand, if you're doing bird watching and you're standing in one spot, you're going to have 3 layers of down coats and your snow bibs and everything else on and still be possibly cold.
And
so you really have to
toe warmers tucked into every place you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that speaking of owls, the other thing that's interesting with them right now is since they are up here and they do have food, they're getting head start on almost all the other birds by laying eggs. They're starting to nest this time of year in January.
Interesting.
And they're good ones at the moment. You can oftentimes get them to respond to hooting because they are they are setting up territories and starting to claim space, and so you can hoot back and forth and they will hoot back at you.
Sure.
In a little while, when they're more on eggs and going into having chicks, they hoot less because they're actually trying to conceal themselves. They
Right.
don't want things to find their nest. But right now, if you go out in the woods and try hooting like an owl, you can get response fairly easily.
So what time of year then do the eggs typically hatch?
Boy, I wish you hadn't asked me that. I don't recall what their incubation time is. I want to say somewhere around like a month and a half, but I'm not really sure.
Regardless, it's basically winter time when young owls are hatching.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating to think of, giving birth to a tiny, helpless little animal in the wintertime.
Yeah, and of course the young ones, they don't have a full set of feathers on them yet or anything, so they're really laying on mom or dad to be sitting on them to keep them warm. Owls do work together as a team. They're not one of the ones where the dad abandons the mom to the nest. So he'll be bringing food in, she'll be sitting on the nest because they really do have to keep the young warm.
Sure. Ravens also start to nest. Not quite as early as owls do, I imagine, but definitely wintertime. The ravens will start to nest.
Yep, and for much the same reasons. They still have food up here. They can find things to eat, and so they might as well get things started early. Both of them also have large young, so that you're looking at a little bit more time before they fledge and a little bit more time for training and everything before they leave home. So it's good to get started if you can.
Yeah.
If you remember from last year, I think it was that the DNR's Eagle Cam nest crashed to the ground because it was overloaded with snow.
Right.
So eagles are another one that are going to be nesting not now, because unlike the owls and the ravens, their food supply isn't up here yet. Well, it still is. It's underneath ice.
Yeah, primarily fish.
Eagles eat fish, yep. So long as the lakes are iced over, the eagles aren't going to be up here. But down farther south, they're going to be starting to nest as soon as they're able to get into places where they can go fishing.
Sure. You mentioned with ravens, as far as their source of food goes, is that primarily like wolf kills, things like that? Is that one of their main sources of food?
Ravens and crows are great opportunistic feeders, as in they will eat whatever is available.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, they're just as happy at a dumpster sometime as they are at a wolf kill. They certainly have no qualms against eating roadside carrion along the way. They'll grab small animals if they can. They're going to, well, not right now, but they would go for nestlings, raid robin's nests and stuff like that much later on in the spring when they're nesting. Okay. So they're going to get whatever they can scrounge. They don't care too much what they eat. They're a lot like some of my friends, in fact.
Well, I think anybody who's left the lid off of their trash can or left some bags of trash in the back of a pickup truck can attest to the fact that it doesn't take them long to find out that there's something to eat there.
No, and they are one of the more incredibly smart birds.
Right.
They've really found out a lot of interesting things about ravens. They came up with a language trick just recently that they thought only humans could really do, and they figured out ravens actually do that as well.
Really?
It's kind of hard to describe exactly what it is, but they're using language in a sense similar to the way that people do, which is pretty crazy. They can count to 5. If you're doing raven studies, they found out you have to have at least like 6 observers go into the blind and 5 leave before the raven doesn't know there's somebody left in the blind.
No kidding.
If you have 5 people go in and 4 go out, the raven will look at you like, hey, there's somebody still in there.
Listen, that is wild. What an amazing bird.
Yeah, they're very smart. They're really, I think they're a cool thing to have up in the Northwoods. They're just a fun bird to have around, I think.
Well, and the number of vocalizations that they have, I was told by a wildlife photographer once that he was able to be in proximity of carrion and basically kind of take a nap until he heard a certain sound from the ravens that they only made when wolves were around. And so he knew when the wolves were coming by that very particular sound that the ravens made.
That makes sense. I mean, they're going to be trying to communicate about things like that. I also like the fact that they play.
Right.
There's a lot of things that they've recorded for ravens sitting on telephone wires, and then they loosen up so that they do like spins around the wire with their legs, and apparently just are doing things for fun, or sliding down hills on their backs in the snow that they will go tobogganing.
I've watched them. I actually filmed a group of ravens on the roof of my garage. There was some moss on top of the garage, and they had plucked a chunk of moss off of the peak of the garage, and one of them would drop the moss so it rolled down the edge of the garage, and the other one would swoop down and pick it up before it rolled off of the garage. I watched them do this over and over and over again, and there's no other explanation for it than that they're just playing, just having fun, amusing themselves.
What is that for kids? Annie I over or something? You throw the ball
I think it is. Yeah. It's so great to be able to experience the wildlife that we have here, and such a unique biosphere that we have here on the Superior National Forest. We talked a little bit on the previous episode about bats.
Yeah, bats this time of year, they should be hibernating. Depending on the species, they hibernate in different parts of the cave. Some of the ones like little brown bats and tricolored bats, they're going to be pretty deep inside of a cave system where the temperature really stays constant. Big brown bats tend to hibernate at the mouths of the cave where it's a whole lot colder. And because of that, they're the bat which is oftentimes found in people's attics during the winter.
Okay.
They're one which tolerates colder temperatures that there might be in your attic, and they, for some reason, just don't care if the temperature goes up and down as much as the little browns do. So one trouble with that is that they will occasionally rouse up thinking that it is springtime because it's warm, and rather than escaping through a hole or checking out the world outside and going, it is too cold out, they will go into your house instead. And then it's nice and warm, but there aren't that many bugs to eat, and there are people who are annoyed by them, and it's not a very good decision on their part. But they'll get into houses and be flying around in people's houses during the winter. And that's nothing to be, concerned about, as in, I know a lot of people are really scared about bats that they might have rabies, but that's based on a relatively poor study that was done at one time. Most bats, if they're active, they don't have rabies. You don't have to worry about that as much as you do about getting the bat to someplace safe where it can actually spend the winter. If you release it outside again, it might be too cold for it. We recommend that you try to capture it with something like a large blanket, so that you basically have a really big catcher's mitt, and you can oftentimes throw a blanket over a flying bat, sort of gather it up. Blankets are thick enough, it's not going to be able to bite through that or anything and hurt you. And then, as you did with the owl, find a wildlife rehab place that'll be able to take it. Oftentimes they have to be overwintered in somebody's refrigerator or whatever, and you can't do that at home, and then they'll be released in the spring.
And it's wise to do that, as you mentioned, of course, because it's not a huge threat to people. They're not a common carrier of rabies unless they're visibly sick or visibly not active. But also because the existence of bats in general seems to be fragile.
It is, particularly the hibernating ones, and they're the ones that are getting the white nose syndrome, and their populations have really plummeted. And they're getting so that there's few enough of them that it's hard to study them. There's a couple that are of special concern, possibly going on the endangered species list, where 10 years ago they were one of the most common mammals in Minnesota. So it's an amazing drop in population. And they're such wonderful parts of the ecosystem because they eat mosquitoes.
Bless them.
and they eat all sorts of agricultural pests too. And we tend to focus on mosquitoes up here, but there's estimates about the amount of money they save agriculture by eating agricultural pests. It's an incredible amount.
Sure.
So there's actual economic reasons why it pays to have bats out there in the world.
Yeah, as much as they have this bad reputation and they've been given this sort of sinister vampire-ish sort of reputation, like you said, they're such a valuable part of the ecosystem. And every time I see bats, especially in the summertime when the mosquitoes are bad, I'm like, thank you for being here. Thank you for your hard work. Keep at it.
Yep. But none of them should be flying around right now.
Right.
And hopefully they're either asleep or they've gone down to sunnier climes and are being migratory snowflake type bats going south for the winter.
Yeah. So good things to keep in mind if you do happen to have a bat that's supposed to be hibernating and it happens to be flying around your house. Some good pieces of information on being able to capture it and help keep it alive, help give it a chance to come back out in the summertime and eat some mosquitoes.
Yep. Circling back to talking about tracks that you see while skiing, the thing I saw an awful lot of this last time were snowshoe hare tracks.
Yeah.
And that's always good because I don't see snowshoe hares that often. They're pretty good at hiding themselves, particularly in the winter when they're white against white snow. And it has set me thinking this winter with less snow that they were really having a rough time of it earlier.
Oh, I felt so bad for them. I saw a bunch of them in December only because they stood out. There was such a stark contrast between these white snowshoe hare that they adapt to the winter, but winter didn't adapt to them so quickly this year.
Right. They might as well have targets painted on their backs for those rough-legged hawks that you were seeing earlier.
Right.
And that's got to be hard. I mean, I don't know. Way back in college, we had one professor who said that, rabbits were born to die. They are sort of nature's food source some of the time.
Sure, yep.
But they at least need a fighting chance. And the snowshoe hares just did not have it at the beginning part of this year because they changed to white. Their change of color is based more on day length than anything else. Yeah. So even if there's no snow, they're going to change to white regardless.
Yeah, it's such an incredible adaptation that they'll change the color of their fur to match their environment in the wintertime, and just kind of a cruel joke this year.
It was. And then on the opposite side of the coin, ermine, the little least weasels that are, a lovely tan color in the summer and then change to pretty white in the winter. Their camouflage is blown too. It's pretty hard to sneak up on things and be a predator if you're white and everything else in the world is brown.
No kidding. Lots of snowshoe hare tracks. And I know in previous years where the population of snowshoe hare seems to really skyrocket, we see things sort of do that in conjunction with that, like the population of lynx that we'll see in this area.
Yep. Lynx and snowshoe hare is the classic predator-prey relationship. If you graph their populations, they track one another really well. If you get more snowshoe hare, you get more lynx. As snowshoe hare drops, the lynx population drops. And it'll be interesting to see what happens this year because suddenly there was this really abundant food supply in a sense because all of the hare were visible. Maybe that's going to drop the snowshoe hare population, and we'll see whether or not it crashes and whether lynx population might follow that. Despite the fact that snowshoe hare were easy to see, it might not have been a great year for lynx either. Lynx are also adapted for snow. They don't change color, but they have the big, wide snowshoe kind of feet that allow them to run on top of snow, and that lets them outcompete things like bobcat.
Yeah.
And when there's not snow on the ground, bobcats can possibly get things faster than the lynx can.
Interesting.
So it might have been hard for lynx, too, to not have a lot of snow, even though there were a lot of snowshoe hare. Or maybe those two things balance things out, so it was just kind of an average year for lynx. One of the tricks with biology is you never have just one variable change. Everything always changes all the time.
Right.
It's really hard to predict, but that's also kind of the fun part about it too.
Yeah. It's so great to see cats in the ecosystem and that balance of the increase in the snowshoe hare shows an increase in the lynx and the bobcats. And this past summer, I saw 2 bobcats at 2 different times. And it's the first time in 26 years of living up here that I actually saw a bobcat in the wild. They're such elusive critters.
They are. I think I've seen more lynx up here than bobcat. In fact, for sure I have. You don't see them that often. They're actually, I think, Minnesota's most populous cat species.
Wow.
And they're even found down in the Twin Cities. Probably one that I remember seeing the most was when I was walking along a railroad right-of-way down in the middle of St. Paul, and there was a bobcat that was hunting along that same railroad right-of-way.
No kidding.
So they get along okay with people. So long as there's food and there's some open space for them to be in, they're able to deal with that. And so they're found all the way from Canadian border, a little bit north of there, all the way on down towards Mexico, and pretty much the United States is just the center of bobcat range. So they do well with exactly the same kind of climate, I guess, that people do, and the same kind of lifestyle.
That's great. Such an exciting world of nature that we have right outside our back door here on the Superior National Forest. And again, just a wonderful time of year to be out and just see the stories that the snow has to tell.
Yep. I think this is a good time to be out and about, and it is fun to see all of those tracks, whether you're skiing by them or, snowmobiling, slow down once in a while enough so you can see what you're going by, or if you're just hiking or snowshoeing, it's a good time of year to be outside, despite it being -7 at the moment.
Right.
We're all used to it. We're Minnesotans, right?
That's right. It's Minnesota. It's northeastern Minnesota. In January, we come to expect this, so we're finally getting to a little more seasonable weather conditions, and I'm not one to complain about that.
Yep. All right.
Thanks so much, Steve Robertson, Interpretation and Education Specialist with the Superior National Forest. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you for listening to Forest North, and a big thank you to Steve Robertson for joining us once again to talk about the landscape and wildlife here on the Superior National Forest. A big thanks to Maggie Whiting for giving us the run-through on Go Live Day for your Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness permits for 2024. That happens on Wednesday, January 31st. Forest North is created by the Ely Tourism Bureau in partnership with the USDA Forest Service Superior National Forest. Find out more about the Superior National Forest at fs.usda.gov/superior. Follow the Ely Tourism Bureau on social media at Visit Ely MN, at ely.org, and email your questions or comments to tourism@ely.org. Thanks again for listening. I'm Brett Ross. Tune in next time to Forest North.